From the travel journal of Dr. Otto Straub, the expedition doctor. It is important to grasp the unique opportunity we are given in having a deep personal experience. At long last, it begins. Preparation for this expedition lasted a whole year. Unbelievable bureaucratic hurdles had to be overcome before the crew of 10 could make a start on their plan to establish contact in the most inaccessible jungle of South America with a tribe of Yanomami Indians who live a traditional life. This tribal people lives today in the hilly border country between Brazil and Venezuela, the region where the source rivers of the Orinoco arise. With its 25,000 members, this is among the largest tribal groups in the South American rainforest. For thousands of years, their home region, which covers an area the size of Austria, was untroubled by outside contacts. In the language of these Indians, Orinoco means father of the land. Puerto Ayacucho is the Venezuelan gate to the Territorio Amazonas, the second largest federal state in the country. The Raudales de Torre Rapids form a natural barrier between the upper and lower Orinoco. They make the river impassable beyond this point. Here, the mighty waterway divides Venezuela from Colombia. Puerto Ayacucho is a melting pot where northern Amazon Indians, African and Indo-European peoples mix. The journey from Salzburg via Caracas to Puerto Ayacucho was quite routine, apart from the fact that more than 100,000 euros had to be raised. The people in Puerto Ayacucho proudly call their country the green lungs of the earth. The adventure began with a 2-hour flight from Puerto Ayacucho to La Esmeralda. From here, the journey continued by boat to San Antonio. From the start, the unstable weather threatened to upset the schedule. After a strenuous night in an unaccustomed hammock, black coffee got our circulation going again the next morning. Everyone loosened up with stretching exercises. The Salzburg artist Thomas Höfinger was the initiator of this remarkable trip. The last stage began in 2 large covered canoes and a small aluminum boat. The Orinoco upstream. The boat trip was supposed to take 1.5 days. Forced stops because of rain made it last a week. The purpose of the expedition? Thomas Höfinger wishes to establish contact with the Yanomami using artistic methods, cautiously approaching the world of their ideas. The Okamo mission, run by the Silesian Order, is the last settlement of any size in the impenetrable jungle. Missionary activity to the Yanomami began from here. Only the doctor and his Indian guide are permitted to land. Antonio, the local guide, knows the route and all the shallows. The river has risen due to heavy rainfall. 2 of the 3 falls that must be negotiated have been made passable by the high water. The more impenetrable the forest, the thicker the swarms of butterflies that rise up in front of the boats. Night falls swiftly. There is very little time to find a safe camping place. The Indians of this region live as nomads and rarely stay more than 9 months in one and the same place. The nomadic lifestyle makes use of the ecological balance. It also helps to avoid tribal feuds. A nightly routine, erecting the radio antenna. The Indian Affairs Authority in Esmeralda requires a daily position report. If no report is sent, they will send out a search party after 48 hours. The spider-infested huts have to be smoked out before they can be used. The fire burns through the night to keep away wild animals. The next morning, the jungle is steaming. The humidity is nearly 100%. The missionaries house their Indian laborers in huts with corrugated iron roofs. The heat accumulated inside, and the temperature rose to 132 degrees. The missionaries give these people a second skin, taken from clothing collections of the prosperous countries of the world. The 5th day on the water. The destination is near. The convoy reaches the Rio Potaco. Again, the schedule is threatened by the rapidly changing weather. Due to the heavy rain, the boats can only travel slowly. The water level rises, and with it, the risk of being stranded on hidden obstacles. At this waterfall, 1,400 pounds of baggage and equipment must be unloaded. Only the light aluminum boat is pulled over the rapids. The 2 canoes are left behind. In the notes left behind by Otto Straub, one can read, "The speedboat was pulled over the rapids in an incredibly swift action. Our destination is less than an hour away." Höfinger's treasure chest. In this trunk, which is more than 100 years old, all the colors for the painting activity with the Yanomami Indians are carried. Rainwater, filtered by the trees, provides a light refreshment. A bird is prepared for dinner. Is it edible? Only the cook, who also killed it, knows for sure. Finally, the rolls of canvas are also loaded. The aluminum boat has to make the trip 3 times before all the equipment has been picked up. The moment of contact approaches. Up to now, the Yanomami in this region have had only occasional contact with whites, above all with scientists and butterfly researchers. Visits to this tribe are highly restricted. The reception committee is astonished by the amount of baggage that the strangers have brought with them. Following this silent eye contact, a shy smile from the chief's son serves to ease the tension. The whites must refuse the invitation to move into the Shabono. The parasites with which the Yanomami are used to living would represent an incalculable health risk for the Europeans. Instead, they erect a base camp with the help of the natives. According to one scientific theory, the Yanomami descend from the immigrant people who began to settle the Americas over 30,000 years ago. During these 30,000 years, they have maintained their ancient culture. They are of small stature. Even the men rarely grow taller than 5'2". Before the Indians vanish into the forest for today, they invite the strangers to visit them at their village the following day. A 5-minute walk away from the landing stage is the Shabono, the circular village in which the Yanomami live. The next day begins, like so many others on this trip, with heavy rainfall. Otto Straub notes chaos under the canvas, which is too small, and depression. Only weeks later, the doctor is killed by an avalanche in South Tyrol. Again, Thomas Höfinger is worried about keeping to his schedule. In the meantime, the photographer Tony Moore shows the children pictures of other Yanomami Indians. The Yanomami are unfamiliar with pictorial representation. In contrast to European or African Neolithic cultures, the Yanomami have never developed their own picture language. The drawing of animals or hunting scenes is unknown to them, as is written language. Their language is based on symbols. The rain finally eases up around 2 p.m. Colors, canvas, and presents for the hosts are prepared and packed for transport to the village. Knives, machetes, and food provisions are intended to keep the Yanomami in good spirits, but they aren't presented until the group departs. The rolls of linen have also survived the strenuous trip to the village Auve Terry intact. The village is only 860 yards away. The path leading there is quite difficult, however. Finally, through the thick foliage of the rainforest, the steep roof of the Shabono appears. The low, narrow entry is meant to provide protection against wild animals and keep enemies away. Some 50 people live together in this Shabono under one roof. Thomas Höfinger begins his preparations for the joint painting activity without delay. The forest people observe each motion intently. The color blue is not available to the Yanomami, so they're not familiar with it. The attempt to interest them in the color blue meets with rejection. The tribal leaders are interested in something completely different. The Yanomami men are Vaiteri. That means they are fierce. They are warriors. They are armed with arrows over 6 feet long, with tips smeared with the deadly poison curare. They roam the forests naked to hunt birds, tapirs, and monkeys. They speak the language of nature. The Yanomami women are responsible for the cultivation of fruit. They take care of the preparation of vital provisions. As a family, they represent a perfectly functioning unit. The gifts of nature are the spirits which they honor in their dances. The tobacco roll is a masculine attribute. Its active substances are released in the mouth from daybreak to sunset. These are distinctive characteristics of the traditional Yanomami Indians. The shabono, in particular, is proof of their manual skills and their wonderful adaptation to the extreme climatic conditions. The open architectural structure of the shabono permits the slightest breeze of the tropical rainforest to waft through to the family living area as a pleasant whiff of air. They share their living space with numerous domestic animals. Long before the Spanish conquistadors reached this continent, dogs were domesticated by Indian tribes. Using our cultural means, Thomas Höfinger wants to make his impressions accessible to the fast-moving 21st century society. But the Indians are unimpressed by Höfinger's preparations and continue with their normal lives. Household utensils, weapons, and the fireplace are their only personal possessions. With their permission, Dr. Otto Straub provides medical care for the villagers. In the meantime, Thomas Höfinger attempts to interest them in the color red. The Indians produce a red dye from the seed capsules of the onoto bush, a kind of chestnut. Thomas Höfinger cuts the canvas. The moment for which he has prepared for over a year is approaching. An intercultural painting session between the 30,000-year-old customs of the Yanomami and contemporary European art. This is the red dye from the Onoto bush. This natural color takes the place of jewelry. It's our second skin, as the Yanomami say. Furthermore, it protects the skin against insects. Thomas Höfinger overcomes the last mental barriers. It is a sign of trust. The Indians' dominant motif is the circle, which they have taken from the spots of the jaguar, the most powerful and fastest animal in their environment. The other motifs they use have been copied from nature as well. Soon, the whole village is taking part. Meanwhile, the camera, the first ever to be seen in these parts, is now ignored. Even the chief has shed his last remnants of mistrust. A feeling of absolute harmony reigns, which is expressed in the painting. Höfinger and his companions are witnesses to a painting session that combines abstract art with the archaic rites and stylistic means of an intact Stone Age culture. Finally, the chief allows Höfinger to decorate his paddle. When the sun sinks behind the trees of the rainforest, the first painting session with the Yanomami Indians comes to an end. The next morning, Höfinger's Venezuelan manager, Alcides Montiel, volunteers to take part in a paint splash session a la Hermann Nietzsche, to the great amusement of the hosts. A total of 32 pictures were painted on these 2 days. Höfinger wants to auction them off and use the money to buy the land on which the Yanomami live. For the first time, they would have the security of a deed. In 1993, the world heard of a massacre in which 73 Yanomami Indians were killed in Brazil. Gold prospectors had attacked 2 villages and murdered most of the inhabitants. The Yanomami are still threatened by land speculation and ruthless adventurers. They have learned to defend themselves, but they are powerless against modern weapons and the unscrupulousness of a so-called civilization. Although it is said that a Yanomami can hit an enemy at a distance of up to 30 yards with a deadly arrow. Using the media of the early 21st century, the Yanomami have immortalized their culture, one which goes back 30,000 years and is now threatened with extinction. As a sign of the newly formed friendship, the chief declared that a dance would be held. In recent years, new dangers have threatened the Yanomami. In the borderlands between Brazil and Venezuela, there are rumored to be great deposits of uranium, gold, and diamonds. Prospectors have introduced diseases that are harmless to us, but deadly for the Indians. Dysentery and influenza have wiped out entire villages. Thomas Herfinger has a clear vision of how his expedition can help the Yanomami Indians to retain a portion of their identity, beyond the reach of civilization's fatal side effects, against which their weapons are useless, and to live a while longer in peace.